Podcasting is more than just talking. It's listening. BSing with Bob Schmidt.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast featuring entrepreneurs, business people, and marketers. This week talking with Elizabeth Dickinson, a certified life coach and public speaker, as well as author of the book, The Concise Coaching Handbook, How to Coach Yourself and Others to Get Business Results. And I had a chance to meet Elizabeth a few months ago back in New York and had a chance to kind of hit up a conversation and chat a little bit about business and invited her onto the podcast to talk about this. And you know, Elizabeth, I think that a lot of people, a lot of self-starters, a lot of entrepreneurs and people that are, you know, in business for themselves have all these great ideas, but sometimes the concise part is a hard thing for people to get.
I'm sorry, did you say the concise part?
Yeah, don't you think? That I think that people have a hard time to try to be concise. We, at least for myself, I'll throw stuff out there, and I could have whittled it down and said, okay, let's just focus in on this one little thing.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually very true. I mean, I remember doing a presentation to folks in the real estate industry, and you know, it was also and home remodelers, and a lot of them, it was sort of interesting, the problems that they brought. And some of it is, you know, how do you deal with people who don't get to the point? You know, and they needed some tips and tricks around that kind of thing. So I think you're right. I think it is tricky to boil things down. That's why it helps to, if you're calling somebody up, to just kind of rehearse in your head a little bit about what you're going to say to them or what your message is going to be, so that you don't have to fumble around when you're actually either leaving a message or on the phone with them. You know, I think that's really helpful. I mean, just going into things and saying, what are the top 3 things that I need to get across in this conversation? Just helping organize and frame your brain just a little bit so that you can have a more effective conversation with other people.
Now, wait a second here. Was that based on my start of the show?
Not at all.
Okay, I'm just double checking. You know, it's funny that you brought that up because I know that my son, he's 20, and before he makes a phone call to anybody, he practices what he wants to say to those people, and still 9 times out of 10 he says, "Dad, I still screw it up. How do you have stuff to say when you're on the radio?" And I said, honestly, I don't know. It just kind of comes to me often.
Well, it's probably because you're a good improviser, you know, and you're just ready to go with wherever the energy of the conversation is going. And I think that's kind of a gift, to be able to allow yourself that kind of spontaneity. But not everybody has that. And so they really do, you know, they need to think about it a little bit so that they won't be nervous. But you have so much radio experience, you probably don't get nervous in that way.
Totally the opposite. I get nervous
really?
all the time, yeah. And it's crazy to think that, but I really do. Or talking in front of a group of people, I despise that. That's one of my least favorite things in the world to do.
What is it about it that you despise so much?
I think it's the fear of messing up. I mean, honestly, I've given myself permission to make mistakes. You know, when I've done things, I said, you know, just go out there and do the best that you can do. But I still sometimes have a difficult time trying to figure out that. Or I think that people perhaps are thinking, well, this guy's a professional. He should do a better job than that.
Oh, man, so really high standards. What would help you get over that, do you think?
I don't know. I really don't know. I've taken classes. I actually went back to college as an adult to try to learn new skills, and I had a speech class, and I did well in the speech class, but I think it's just I need to get out of my own head.
And what would help you get out of your own head?
I don't know. Maybe this counseling session.
Well, I was just using some coaching techniques with you, which is a lot of it is putting it back on the person.
Uh-huh.
Because the neuroscience shows that if you ask those questions, you know, in a curious, friendly, kind of welcoming way, that the answers that people come up with are going to be more effective. They're more likely to listen to themselves. They're more likely to act on their own advice. And it's going to be impossible for them to stop thinking about, well, however you've said it to them. So, yeah. So I'm hoping if we were in an actual coaching session, we'd delve a little deeper and see if we could come up with some strategies, you know, to help you.
Right.
to help you do that. It's amazing to me, though, how self-critical people are, because I went to a real estate seminar a few weeks ago, and there was a young Asian guy, very successful. I mean, incredibly successful. You know, he started this whole company, which is wholesaling properties, and he's been so successful at it, he can't even, renovate all the properties that come his way. And so he makes them available to other investors. And he was on this panel, and in the middle of the panel, he just said, you have no idea how nervous I am. My heart is beating a mile a minute, and I'm finding it difficult to breathe. And he goes, this is the first time I've ever been in front of a group of people like this, and doing public speaking. And when he said that, he even said it calmly. And I went up to him afterwards and I said to him, you need to know that unless you had said that, I said, there isn't a single person out here who would have been able to tell that you were nervous or that you had never done this before. I said, you did just fine. You just need to have some more confidence in what you're doing. And he took my card and he said, you're a public speaker, so that means so much to me. And I just thought, people, I come from an acting background. And one of the things they said to us very early on as actors is that, people come to plays, people come to events, and they want to like you. And they're not coming with all of those judgment things in their head that you think they are for the most part. So, you can just kind of trust in that people want to hear what you want to say, and they're not sitting there going, being all persnickety in the way that you might be persnickety about yourself. So I just wish that I could just inject everyone with some confidence, instead of which I can coach people there, but I can't do it, in a mass way to everyone across the United States.
That would be your superpower if you had them? That's what you
that would be my superpower. Yes, if I could do that, then holy moly, yeah.
Just think of the money you'd make.
Incredibly effective. Think of the money.
But do you find that a lot of people that's a problem that a lot of people have is the maybe not confidence, but the fact of talking in front of people or being public?
Yeah, I mean, I've read the statistics that people fear public speaking more than dying. So I'm just like, that's crazy.
No, I fear death a little bit more than public speaking, because I will public speak. I don't want to die today or tomorrow. I still have a whole life to live.
I would hope so. I mean, you're a radio guy, but yeah, it is a little bit crazy. But I understand. People want to know in advance that they know what they're going to say, and then they want to know that it's going to be received well, and they want to know that they're not going to screw up. And, they kind of want to control things. And the only thing you can control is what you say and how you are in the moment. So a lot of it is about finding ways ahead of time so that you can prepare to the best of your ability, but then to just kind of let it go and be in the moment.
So is me saying to myself that, I could just do the best job that you can do? I mean, is that kind of getting into the moment and being coachable, or am I?
Well, I think so. I mean, a lot of it is finding something to say to yourself that is going to mean something. I mean, I coached somebody at Land O'Lakes once, and he was really funny about what would, in a sense, cheer him up. But it was along the lines of, he had a little mantra of, I think it was, is it really that important? That's what he would say to himself. Now, It's not what I would say to myself, but he found that by saying to himself, is it really that important? It actually diffused the internal anxiety that he was having, and it would stop him from blowing up at people, which was a problem for him. He was getting into trouble with his supervisor because of that. So I think it's about finding the thing. I mean, in each person, it's going to be a little bit different. So if I were working with you, I would get you into a relaxed state, and we would sort of go down a little bit deep into your, a little bit deeper into your unconscious, and kind of bring out the wise part of you and say, well, what does the wisest part of you have to say about this?
Well, I say good luck trying to find it is what I say.
Everyone has one. I haven't met anybody without one.
Mine's more of a wise ass, I think, than anything else.
Well, and it can be that too. It could be a wise ass thing that will diffuse it for you. But whatever it is, find something, or find a little routine that you can do that just kind of will calm you down, take away the nerves. It's all about trying to have an easier experience of being human and being in a human body and having to deal with other people.
What puts you on it? What puts you on edge?
I've done the Strengths Finder, and if you haven't done Strengths Finder, I really recommend it to people. It's inexpensive. The Gallup organization puts it out there, and it's a really useful tool. One of my strengths, but which I can use against me, any strength which is overused becomes a weakness, has to do with being an achiever. Like that's one of my top things. And achievers just really like measurable progress. Everybody likes measurable progress. They found that one of the predictors of happiness for, virtually everyone is making some, and it doesn't matter how slight, but having the sense of making some progress every day. Well, that's really ramped up high in me. And so I'm going out of town tomorrow, and I always use the opportunities right before I go out of town to get those jobs done that you've been putting off for forever. And so I'm kind of hard on myself, and it puts me on edge. It's like, can I get all of these things done before I leave? So that can kind of put me on edge, and so I just have to ease up on myself sometimes. And, sometimes you make more progress than other times. And I found as somebody who's an achiever, and not just as a coach, is that, sometimes I have to track what I'm doing, because otherwise I don't give myself credit for the stuff that I have done.
Right.
Because, if you make a whole bunch of phone calls and you didn't get the result that you wanted, like it was all messages, or, people keep calling you back and you keep missing each other, and so nothing gets accomplished or something, you have to remind yourself that I made those phone calls. I made 5 phone calls, or I made 10 phone calls today, and I just have to, even if it didn't result in what I wanted, the fact is I did it, and that's the win. So I think, you have to find all kinds of different ways to kind of make sure you're not being too hard on yourself.
Right. Is that why they say sometimes, I've heard a few people say that, start every morning by making your bed, because at least you got something done. Right.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that's a really, it's a good point. Or if you have lists and stuff, they say often do the hardest thing, maybe after making your bed, but the hardest thing first, because as you go through the day, you literally start the day with more willpower than you end the day with. Mm-hmm. And it's not that it's a finite supply. It's just harder to get the harder things done the later in the day you go. So, if you can get some of the hard stuff done early in the day, I think you do feel better about stuff, but again, that's a little bit malleable, because sometimes you need a couple of easy wins if you've had a couple of hard days. Right. So, you might get the easier things done first.
Isn't it a lot of that based on what your time of the day is? For me, I got up at 4 o'clock in the morning for 30 years, and I did morning radio every day for 30 years. And for me, my time of the day was early in the morning when I got laid off and started working for myself. My dad suggested to me, and I'm glad that he did, he said, why don't you do your creative stuff in the morning, because that's when you're used to getting up, and that's when you're used to doing those types of things. And, he was right.
Well, that's good. You really know you really know yourself. That's very, very true. It's sort of ironic for me because I was an actor for, a number of years, a professional union actor. And of course, rehearsals would go more like 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. But once you got into doing the shows, it's almost always, you might have a matinee, but you always had evening performances. And so I think even today, sometimes my creative work is sometimes better done towards the end of the day.
Right.
Because I just have that kind of pattern inside myself. And I just find it's hard for me to set down, I can do other kinds of work. earlier in the day. But I find that if I'm doing creative work, it's hard for me to start before about 1 p.m., and if I have charge over my own schedule, I will not start working until kind of later in the day on the, truly creative stuff like the fiction writing or something, as opposed to other kinds of writing.
Right. Now, is that kind of the stuff that you go through your clients with when you're life coaching? Is to find your part of the day and find out what is good for you and what works best for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's really, there are exercises called the Recipe for Success. I think I put it in the book as well. But it's about figuring out what are the circumstances surrounding you when you're most successful. And for some people it is going to be time of day, but it is important to get really specific about it. It's funny because I just coached somebody and she just left a really well-paying corporate job to go out on her own. One of the things she shared with me was that when she was at this corporate job, it took her many years before she actually realized that she could schedule out her own day with places that were just kind of X'd out for her to think.
What does that mean?
For her to just like sit and think and write plan her schedule and just be very, very kind of internal. And she's definitely, a little closer to being an extrovert, even though she was very good at working with people and that kind of thing. But her sense of freedom and personal space was such that she really needed quiet time during the work period every day. And she found that nobody minded if she scheduled it and said, look, I'm not available during these times. And now that she's working on her own, she starts every day with a little meditation, a little thinking about the day, a little bit of journaling, and then she's doing a lot of freelance writing now. And so then she gets into her freelance writing. But yeah, it's really about working with your own rhythms so that, and not to be ashamed of them or feeling like they're a weakness in some way. But if there's a way and there's circumstances under which you do your best work, why wouldn't you try and recreate them instead of, trying to fight them? It's like, well, I should be, I should be doing this at such and such a time. Well, let go of a few of the shoulds. Where are the places that it's easy for you, and what are the times where it's easiest for you to work on that stuff? Now, I know that's a little more difficult if you're in a much more structured job, but even in structured jobs, there's ways to work around it. I think people should ask for what they need, in order to succeed as much as possible. And right. I think as long as you're honest about it, people will give you more leeway.
You mentioned she's closer to an extrovert than an introvert. Do you think that a lot of people are mislabeled?
I do, because I think there are false ideas of what introverts and extroverts are, because I think I'm equal parts introvert and extrovert. I mean, I really do love having downtime and thinking and writing and being by myself. But I also get a lot of energy from being with people. So, I mean, the rough definition of introvert and extrovert is, where do you get your energy? Do you get more energy from being with people, or do you get more energy from being on your own? Now, my experience is I get energy from both places, and I need them both in balance. And I actually do think that's true for most people. I mean, there's some people that actually fall on the introvert scale who in a group are very extroverted, but they're also very protective of their time alone. And they know how to do that. It's just that they act like an extrovert when they're with other people because they've done such a good job of protecting their downtime, so that they take care of themselves, really.
Can that change? Because I think that's where I am. I think I do well in a group of people, like if there's beers involved. but I really, as I've gotten older, I've really learned to like being by myself.
Yeah, I think so. I think a lot of it has to do with what did you get the most of growing up. And then I think you can change over time. I mean, I would say, I would say that, they're people that I really gravitate to because of the topics and because I feel very comfortable with them. And so, for the sort of private, more sort of intimate times, there are probably fewer people, that I really kind of let down my hair with, but I really enjoy those times. But it doesn't mean I can't be extroverted when I'm in a group, or can get along with, all kinds of different kinds of people. They've done some studies recently, and I think I just read this the other day, that because, and they are tying this to social media, is that the amount of truly close friends that all of us have has actually gone down over the decades. And they think that it has to do with social media.
I could see that.
Which I think is really fascinating. I don't know that it's totally healthy, but I think it is fascinating.
So how do we become more concise in our life?
How to become more concise? Well, you mean in terms of talking with other people and that kind of thing?
Well, because your book is called The Concise Coaching Handbook, so how do we become more concise? Without picking up your book and reading it, how can the average listener right now say, you know what, I can be more concise by doing what?
Well, I would say a very, very simple thing to do, which I think is, I just think it organizes you a whole lot better. And some people are, there are a lot of people that already do this, but just starting to make lists. Like the night before, before you go to bed,
you're going to say
or
the night
first
before
thing in
Christmas?
the morning.
The night before Christmas? Make that list, check it twice, find out who's naughty or nice?
This is about prioritizing. So it's putting down, you can start by putting down all the things that you want to get done. And then you can pick out the top 3 that if you get those done, that's what's going to make you feel the best about the day. Mm-hmm. And what they've done some studies, and you're 30% more likely to accomplish something if you've written it down.
Really?
So I would say that, I would say that is the number one thing that you could do. And just keep making a new list every day, or transferring things over to another list if they don't get done on that day. And I actually find that once you've committed something to paper, whether it's, a list or your journal or something like that, your mind stops worrying about it to the same extent. Because, if you've got a whole bunch of things, and everybody has ADD today, partly because I think of all the screen time, and I certainly feel it myself. If I've got a bunch of things running through my head, I'm likely to miss one of them. And then you're like, oh, crap, I meant to put such and such in the car so that I could, return it to the library or whatever. Mm-hmm. But if you've written something down, your unconscious stops worrying about it. It's kind of like, oh, you've paid attention to me. That's one, this is some of the stuff that you have to get down. And you're not going to forget it. You really are so much less likely to forget it if you write it down. And I think that that's one way to be concise in your life. And just to give yourself a little bit of a focus. Another thing is if you're trying to take on, we're coming up to the end of the year. If you're doing resolutions, find support. Write something down, get support from a buddy. Ask the buddy to check in with you, just kind of say, will you check in with me once a week to see how I'm doing on losing this 5 pounds? I want to lose 5 pounds over the next 6 weeks. I'm trying to make it a SMART goal, specific, measurable, achievable, results oriented, and time-based. Mm-hmm. So will you check in with me? And you're much more likely to accomplish something, again, if you've gotten support or if you think somebody's checking up on you. I mean, that's at least part of what a coach does.
Right.
A coach helps you figure out what's the most important thing, things to you in all of the different areas of your life. Then you prioritize them. And then you ask simple questions like, what's the best way for you to achieve that? And then I always say to clients, once they've given me something, I'll say, well, when do you want to achieve that by? And they can, define it. And sometimes, they'll say, well, I should do such and such. And I go, do you want to commit to that? And then I say, You can say yes, you can say no, or you can say, I want to amend it. But you just kind of get people moving. You get people moving. And, there's happiness studies, again, that show that by making a little bit of progress, in a consistent way, people's mental health improves. They become happier because they can see results. And I mean, that's essentially, that's what a lot of coaching is. What's important to you? What do you want to do about it? When do you want to do it by? And I'm going to check in with you and make sure that you've done it. And it doesn't mean you're a bad person if you haven't done it. I always send out a coaching form that says, did you, achieve what you said you were going to do? And if you didn't, is it still important? Because often what happens is that you start down one road and you go, oh, no, there's something that I could do that would be more effective than this. I'm going to do that instead. So don't beat yourself up, you hit the overarching intention of what you wanted to do.
What are the 3 things we could take away from your book?
I've put into the coaching book almost all the exercises that I use with people, and that you can use these exercises to coach yourself. The second part of the book is really about coaching other people, and it is about the techniques that you can use if you are a supervisor, a manager, a parent, a spouse, the specific questions that you can ask that are going to motivate people to take action. And that's really important. So if you can incorporate even a few of these techniques in the way that you interact with other people, it teaches people what active listening is, what compelling questions are, how to establish accountabilities with people so that they follow through. I think if you can incorporate some of those in the way that you work with other people, you can have better relationships and you can have happier employees because they're able to achieve more and feel better about what they do.
Elizabeth, how do we find your book? How do we find out more information about your coaching and your book and, getting you as a speaker and, those kind of things?
Well, if you go to my website, pursueyourpath.com, pursueyourpath.com has all the different ways of reaching me. It talks about coaching with me, and there's information about my book there. My book is available on Amazon. It's also available at Business Expert Press. And if somebody wanted to buy them in bulk, they could talk to me because I can obviously get a better discount.
The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is brought to you by Orange Computer. Find them online at orangecomputerlax.com. And by Tri-State Sound and Light. Find them online at tristatesound.com. Tell your story with microcasts by podcastforhire.com. The BS with Bob Schmidt podcast is a podcast for hire production.